They came into negotiations just 2 months ago, smug grin. I said, yeah, we have 460 kilograms of enriched uranium, enough for 11 bombs. They went on a program to build hundreds of ballistic missiles a month. The reason the Assad regime fell, this was a brutal, brutal regime. I don't have to tell you. When we took out Hezbollah, it revealed the fact that Assad was completely dependent on Hezbollah for staying alive. You have to understand what a ballistic missile is. A semi-trailer on the highway. Imagine that semi-trailer is packed with explosives and it's flying through the sky 4 times the speed of sound. When that thing hits, it's like a small nuclear bomb. A unified region where the United States will have to be less present. It will be able to move its assets, particularly military assets, to the Far East to deal with the rising powers of China. If there's more regional cohesion in the Middle East, there's less of a need for the United States to be present. If that happens, it's going to be a very redemptive age that we're moving into.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this Middle East 24 and Yalla exclusive. At a moment of unprecedented escalation in the Middle East amid ongoing strikes targeting the Islamic Republic regime in Iran and rising regional tensions and conflict, we bring you a critical and timely conversation with one of the most important diplomatic figures at the center of this moment. Joining us today is Dr. Michael Leiter, Israel's ambassador to the United States, its top diplomatic representative in Washington, and a key voice shaping Israel's engagement with the U.S. administration during this time. A seasoned strategist, scholar, and diplomat, Ambassador Leiter is navigating one of the most consequential periods in Israel-U.S. relations in recent years, at a time when military action, diplomacy, and regional alliances are all being tested simultaneously. And before we begin, at Yalla, we are committed to amplifying voices that promote clarity, dialogue, and deeper understanding of the Middle East, North Africa, especially during times like this. If you believe in bringing nuanced, impactful stories from the region to global audiences, make sure to follow Watch Yalla on Instagram, X, Facebook, and YouTube. And for our audience tuning in to Middle East 24, you're listening to the Middle East Breakdown podcast, where we bring you sharp analysis, exclusive interviews, and on-the-ground perspectives from across the Middle East, North Africa region. Follow Middle East 24 on X, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple, or whatever it is that you use to listen. And give us your best rating to help us grow and continue bringing you these conversations. It's wonderful to have you today with us, Ambassador Leiter.
It's good to be with you, Hayvi. Thank you.
I want to start with your story. You were actually born in the U.S. You are from Scranton, where
I hope you're not going to hold that against me.
People love the series The Office.
Yeah.
So tell us about you growing up and your decision to make Aliyah to Israel.
Well, it had nothing to do with The Office. When I was growing up, there was no television program coming out of Scranton. Mm-hmm. But somewhere in the 3rd grade, I remember we were learning the book of Genesis, and at some point I just raised my hand and I said, where was all this taking place? Was it on Madison Avenue or Jefferson Avenue or Mulberry Street? Mm-hmm. And the teacher said, what do you mean? It didn't take place here, it took place in Israel. I said, okay. And then I waited a few minutes and raised my hand again, and I said, well, why aren't we there? And he said, well, we're here. We're just waiting for Messiah to come. Mm-hmm. I said, that didn't sit well with me. It didn't make any sense. Usually things that you want, that you identify with, you dive into and embrace. Mm-hmm. And I was always curious about the land of Israel. And when I was 18, I said, I'm out of here.
Wow, you at 18 years old.
Yeah. I was just before my 19th birthday. I had finished high school at 16, so I'd spent 2 years in rabbinical college.
So wow, you were like an advanced student.
Well, yeah, you might say so. And I went straight to Israel and continued my education, did the army, and then continued my education. My education is kind of spread over many, many years.
And you have a doctorate degree?
I do have a doctorate degree, and I did my postdoc, which was also published by Cambridge. So I never stop learning. I think we stay young if we continue to learn all the time.
I want to know about you growing up. Did you ever envision yourself or dream to become the Israeli ambassador to Washington, especially in a time like this?
No, I never dreamed about being ambassador. I really never dreamt about a particular career. And the funniest thing in my life is that whatever I did plan for usually didn't work out. And whatever I did successfully over my lifetime has always been, you know, a black swan, has always come out of nowhere. And this position as well was not planned for. Maybe it was planned for somewhere up above, but not by me. And the Prime Minister called and asked me to take the position, and I did. That's why I'm here.
You worked under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu before. You also worked under Ariel Sharon. Tell us about that in your kind of journey working in different positions, and what brought you to here today.
Yeah. So I think what prepared me is that I've been both on the policy side of things and the practical political side of things. So I studied, you know, political science, law, international relations, and of course my doctorate is in political theory, but I've also been involved in government. So I lived government, whether it was doing reform programs. I was Deputy Director General of Ministry of Education, and there were huge budget cuts. The ministry had to embark on tremendous reforms within the system. And as Deputy Director, I was asked to head that up. And I had to work a lot with the finance ministry. And then when I left education, then Finance Minister Netanyahu asked me to come on board as Chief of Staff. So I remember the first meeting I had with him. He said, well, what are your degrees in? And I said, well, political science. He said, I said, law. He said, oh, every Jew is a lawyer. I said, well, I have a master's in international relations. He said, now we're starting to get somewhere, but you got to study economics. I said, well, I came here to work. He said, no, you study at the same time. And he turned around and pulled a book off the shelf, which was a book on economic systems that work and economic systems that fail. And I read heavily while I was working with him. He reads heavily. It's something that people don't know about him. And always reading, always learning, always studying. And I try to do the same. And shortly afterwards, I also decided to run for Knesset. This was 2009. And I didn't get in by a little sliver. And you have to make a decision. Do you stay on the carousel for the next round? You know, like do something just to get through to the next 4-year cycle? And I decided that I had had enough, that if I didn't get in, I had to do other things. And then I went back and did my doctorate. Then I found myself doing policy in South America and developing countries and African countries throughout the 2010s, you know. Then I did a lot of think tank work. So I've been on both the policy planning side and the policy implementation side. And it's prepared me well for this position.
Let's go back to your family a little bit, because you're also, you have a big family. You have 8 children. And you're holding such an important position in such a critical time. How is it being a father of 8 children and having a big family prepare you, shape how you see what you're doing? How does it impact you as an ambassador?
The greatest success I've had in life is fathering 8 children and many grandchildren. I'm actually working on the grandchildren now. I lost my oldest son in the war in Gaza. He was my best friend and the first one of my children to call me dad. And I live very much to perpetuate his life. He left me 6 grandchildren.
Yes.
And I loved him very, very much. And the pain of losing him, the longing for him, is actually a physical pain. It's hard to describe. And I mentioned before the Prime Minister called. When he called, I hesitated for a moment about taking the position.
That was after Moshe, your
yeah,
son,
yeah.
who was actually also studying to be a doctor.
Well, he completed his medical studies. He actually received his white coat, and he was going to start his residency on October 8th. He received his white jacket on August 2023, just 2 months before October 7th massacre. And of course, October 8th just changed everybody's life. 3 weeks after the massacre, he led IDF troops into Gaza. On the second week, the end of the second week of the war, he went into a booby trap of Hamas. He found a tunnel that they were looking for, and it was booby trapped, and he was killed in a massive explosion together with 3 of his other commandos. He had spent 15 years in special ops. It's the Israeli equivalent of Delta Force.
Wow.
And most of his operations are still classified. But because he was so good, he was asked to actually lead the brigade of commandos that went in. And when the prime minister called, about 4 or 5 months after he was killed and said, "Would you go to Washington?" I hesitated. And I'll never forget, on the phone, there was quiet, and then he said, "What would your son say?" And I knew what my son would say. It was like he was talking to me and saying, "You got to scrape yourself off the floor and start living again. And you got to live for me too."
Yeah.
So he is with me every moment of the day, in every decision I take, in every meeting I have, in every interview that I sit down to. And I spend a lot of time talking to my kids back in Israel. They're all, very, very busy in their own lives. 5 of them are married, and there's 3 I'm still waiting for to choose their wives.
Yeah.
But I'm also very busy with my grandchildren, and I have them come over to visit with me and spend time. The ambassador's residence is huge, so they have rooms and place to stay, and I enjoy them very much when they come. I try to be very much involved in their lives, even though we're far apart.
Beautiful. I actually wanted to, ask you about this because, people, when they talk about war, nobody likes war. War is hard. War is ugly. But sometimes it's the only way. And you and your family paid the ultimate price. But how do you see, what's your message about this for people who are maybe detached from what's happening in the Middle East, and the fact that so many people, including, where I come from too, we've been paying the price of not confronting these elements, extremist groups like the IRGC, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, all of the Iranian-backed militias that have been terrorizing people for so long. It's hard not to just talk about this, as a matter of fact.
Consider Jewish history. What did our grandparents and great-grandparents and great-grandparents, what did they talk about? What did they confront? They confronted persecution, execution, being thrown out from place to place. Their discussion was one of how to survive. And now our survival takes on a different narrative. It's a narrative of life, not of death. Yes, I came to Israel and I had to join the IDF. And I fought in the first Lebanese War, 1982 to 85, and then I did reserve duty for a number of years. Mm-hmm. All my kids, went to do Army service. I told my oldest, Moshe, was in Delta Force in the Air Force. My second is in paratroopers. My daughter comes next. Her husband is a brigade commander in the Givati Brigade. My next son was in the Egoz, which is Golani Commandos. Mm-hmm. My fifth is my second daughter, whose husband is also an officer in the Givati Brigade. Then I've got Shmuel, who's an infantry in the Kfir Brigade. Then I've got Noam, who's Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. But he served as well. He used to pack the duffel bags for the soldiers. Wow. He served. Mm-hmm. And my little one, he's not so little, but he's my youngest, is in artillery. Mm-hmm. And right now, even though they lost their older brother, the one in paratroopers is in South Lebanon. My youngest one, artillery, is on the border. My sixth is in the Jordan Valley protecting us. We don't have the luxury of sitting back, because if the IDF was to shut down operations for an hour, we'd be finished. Look what happened on October 7th. We had a complete breakdown of the system. Nothing worked. It was the perfect storm. Who saved the country? These kids. Mm-hmm. These kids saved the country, my kids' generation. They took full responsibility for what was going on. And without getting orders and without having a command system, they raced into their cars, they took their personal weapons, and went into the line of fire. What did we do for 2,000 years? We ran away from the line of fire because we had no choice, because we were helpless and we were hopeless. Today, we have a generation of kids who run into the line of fire to protect and defend. So what do I want to be part of? I want to be part of this generation and celebrate it. Celebration of life.
Israel today, you know, giving the history of the Islamic Republic regime and what it has been trying to achieve for the last few decades now, since 1979, which is to destroy Israel, to this, you know, of course, would want to destroy the United States. That's what they were, you know, the big Satan and the little Satan. That's basically their slogan. And they've been destroying Arab countries. That basically what's happening right now is that is the kind of the completion of Israel's war of independence, because this axis has been trying to destroy Israel, basically, for all of these different decades. Do you see it that way?
No, absolutely. It's a war of independence that has proceeded with minor interruptions ever since the modern state was established in 1948. You know, think about it, Hayvi. The only country in the world that's expected to say thank you when somebody says you have a right to exist is Israel. Like, you know, imagine you went to a dinner for the Congo, you know, and you wanted to draw applause, and you gave a speech, and you said, I believe in the right of the Congo to defend itself. Nobody would applaud. They'd throw you out in your head. Imagine you went to a dinner about Belgium or, you know, I don't know, Korea. And you said they have a right to defend themselves, or they have a right to exist. Nobody would applaud. But you go to a dinner of Jews in support of Israel, and you say, I believe Israel has the right to defend itself. And everybody just breaks into applause. It's just so wonderful that somebody thinks we have a right to exist. Well, you're damn right we have a right to exist. And you don't have to, we don't get that because you acknowledge that. Sure, we have a right to defend ourselves, and that doesn't have to be acknowledged by anybody. It's a given. It's a given for anybody else in the world. And that's the essence of Zionism, which is so besmirched lately, is so put down and degraded. Zionism doesn't come and say, we want something better or above anybody else. No. Zionism comes and says, we deserve no less than anybody else. Everybody else has the right to defend themselves. Everybody else has the right to exist. And so do we. And we want to take that for granted, but we can't, because it's threatened. Because what Iran's agenda, this regime's agenda, is us to eliminate the Jewish state. So we have to push back. And I will add to that, you know, there's so much Holocaust study and Holocaust legislation. And sometimes I think that the most important lesson of the Holocaust is forgotten. And the most important lesson is that when somebody says they're intent on killing you, believe them. Had the world believed in 1930s what Hitler was saying, maybe they could have prevented the Second World War and 65 million dead. Right now, what President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are doing is preventing war, is ensuring that these apocalyptic lunatics in Tehran will not be successful in their chants, death to Israel, death to America, little Satan, great Satan. You have to appreciate the fact that these people really believe in destroying Western civilization and Judeo-Christian civilization. And what we're trying to do is prevent that from happening and allowing moderate Islam, which is so well projected forward by the UAE, for example. And notice, who did Iran fire those drones on more than anybody else?
The UAE.
UAE.
Yeah.
Because they represent the complete flip side of what Iran was exporting. Iran is exporting death and destruction for anybody who's not part of their Islamist vision. UAE is exporting moderation, accommodation, and peace.
And that's basically what scares them the most, right?
That's what scares them the most.
A region that has those values that could coexist with one another, that
Absolutely.
could prosper.
When they saw the Abraham
flourish.
Accords, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, unfortunately Sudan is mired in civil war, but they see these countries coming in. They see the fact that we have a wonderful relationship with Azerbaijan, which is 10 million Shiites.
Yeah.
And we have increasing trade with Muslim countries. We just recognized Somaliland. People don't get it. Somaliland is a country of 6.5 million Muslims living under a democratic government, where every 4 years they have elections, and it works.
Yes.
Right, for 35 years in the Horn of Africa, and we're actually the only country.
It's a success story.
It's a success story.
And
It's amazing that the world's democracy is just not lining up to follow our lead.
To support the success stories, so more of these success stories can happen.
Absolutely.
This is one of the things I actually like, especially for Western audience in general, because people in the Middle East are a lot more aware of the dynamics and what has been happening, right? What has this regime in Iran has been doing to different people, different communities, their own people, oppressing women in horrific ways, murdering people on sectarian grounds, and also just basically to conquer and destroy, right?
Every 2.5 hours, someone is hung by this regime in Tehran. You have to wrap your head around that. Every 2.5 hours, there are somewhere between 9 and 15 people hung every day in Tehran.
Because it's, I think, the second largest execution, like kind of rate per capita in the world, right?
Yeah, it's an execution lab. I mean, it's just when we hit the Basij, the internal security, 2-3 weeks ago, they were setting up roadblocks in the streets. They're still doing it, by the way, except now they're doing it under tunnels. It's difficult for us to get to them. But they were pulling people out of cars. And if they didn't think that they were supporting the regime, they'd just kill them on the site. Women are raped on the site in public. I mean, that's how to shame the entire family. This is horrific. I mean, this is what the Hamas did on October 7th, even though it was denied, by UN agencies. And, it's like the phenomenon of telling the woman who gets raped that she's responsible for it. So, those who are supporting Hamas were saying, well, they really didn't do it. If they did it, the Jews had it coming. But they probably did it because they told the internal security forces of Israel that, and they were complicit in this. All these crazy stories that come up.
Yes.
And of course, there are podcasters that repeat this, the canard, the blood libel. It's like in the Middle Ages, if there was a pogrom against Jews in a community somewhere in Europe, well, they had it coming because they put blood in the matzah. The matzah, the wafers we eat on Passover.
Yes.
So we put blood. And anybody who knows anything about Judaism knows that it's impossible to imbibe blood. I mean, just the whole thing was just so insane. Or that we poison the wells, of people who are dying from bubonic plague.
So yeah, it's basically just kind of like you said, blood libels and just fabricating stories and narratives to promote anti-Semitism, promote hate. And this is something that, as somebody who was born and raised in the Middle East, an Arab, majority Muslim country, that is controlled by a regime that was part of the Islamic Republic regime's access, those are basically all of the, kind of hating the other, hating the difference, and specifically Israel, specifically the Jewish people. That was just always kind of the narrative that everybody would have to hear. And if that's not what you believe, you're demonized, you're threatened, you could lose your life. And now we have this basically confrontation with the Islamic Republic regime that is, for a lot of people in the region, is basically finally, it's like a nightmare that has been haunting this region. And Israel and the United States are, in a joint operation, are confronting the IRGC, the leaders of this regime, and the Basij, and mainly the ballistic missile program and the nuclear program. Can you share with us just Israel's decision to go after these programs? Why now? What is the objective?
The objective is not to have an entity in Tehran that's pursuing nuclear weapons, massive ballistic missile program, and support for proxies that are destabilizing the region and inflicting death and destruction. So after the June War, called the 12-Day War, Rising Lion, Midnight Hammer, the expectation was that they had taken such a beating that they'd now put their nuclear weapons program aside and work towards accommodation instead. And the President of the United States warned them, don't go back to doing it again. And they immediately went to enriching uranium. They came into negotiations just 2 months ago with their, the grin on their face, smug grin. They said, yeah, we have 460 kilograms of enriched uranium, enough for 11 bombs. Right? And that's their starting point in negotiations. They kind of laughed at the United States. So they went back to enriching uranium. They went about building this site called Pickaxe, which is so deep in the ground, underground, that even a B-2 would not be able to effectively strike it. So they went back to enriching uranium. They went on a program to build hundreds of ballistic missiles a month. You have to understand what a ballistic missile is. People don't appreciate this, but the best way to explain it is a semi-trailer on the highway, right? You're driving 70 miles an hour, a semi-trailer comes flying by, the car gets a little bit of a jolt on the side because of the wind that the semi-trailer generates. Well, imagine that semi-trailer is packed with explosives and it's flying through the sky 4 times the speed of sound. When that thing hits, it's like a small nuclear bomb. So we have a multi-layered missile defense system, our David Sling, our Arrow defense system, the THAAD missile system, the Aegis defense missile system, but they can be overwhelmed when you shoot many of them. And we found in the last war that 88% were held out, but the 12% that get through create tremendous amount of damage. Now imagine instead of firing 30 or 40 missiles at the same time, they fire 300 and 400 missiles at the same time. So you're having the same 12% get through, but the 12% is tremendously more in terms of the quantity, and the damage is just incredible. And we're a tiny little country. Israel's a tiny country. You drive from Washington to Dulles Airport, you fit all of Israel in. It's 40 miles. That's the width of the state of Israel. That's the width of the state of Israel. Mm-hmm. People don't understand that. So if you have all of these ballistic missiles falling at the same time, it's almost like a nuclear bomb.
Can we talk about the objective? Because
the objective is prevent all that. There's no regime that has the capability of nuclear weapons, enriching uranium, and creating a nuclear-tipped warhead. No ballistic missile program that can endanger them. Look at the way they lied. People are so surprised that murderers lie. They said they don't have an ICBM. That's an intercontinental ballistic missile. So we see now that they did. They just shot 2 of them towards Diego Garcia. Mm-hmm. So it's not yet intercontinental. It's not long enough to hit but it's the same technology. So give them a few more months.
Yes.
And they hit Chicago. Mm-hmm. And they lied. They said, we don't have that. And they just shot them. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, you have the enrichment program, the ballistic missile program, and the support for proxies, where you come from.
Yes.
Your neighborhood, Lebanon.
Yep. And Hezbollah, by the way, Hezbollah was slaughtering people in Syria and Lebanon.
Of course.
Of course attacking Israel. So it's like the whole neighborhood has been the victim.
The reason why, the Assad regime, which I understand you actually had to flee, right?
Yes.
You had to flee the Assad regime.
I had to flee Syria.
Well, the reason the Assad regime fell, and this was a brutal regime. I don't have to tell you. I mean, just mass killings.
And the world doesn't know about what they did.
Mass
killings. No coverage of this.
The president set a red line and then let it go. Chemical weapons, burning people, incinerating people. It was a horrible regime. Well, it fell. Somebody should say thank you to Benjamin Netanyahu and the government of Israel, because when we took out Hezbollah, right, it revealed the fact that Assad was completely dependent on Hezbollah for staying alive.
That's true. And the IRGC-backed militias.
Yeah.
Both.
So when the Hezbollah was degraded, the hollowness of his own troops was came to the fore, and that everything collapsed.
And by the way, a lot of people say that Israel basically toppled the Assad regime.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, absolutely.
Liberated Syria from the Assad regime. Yeah. Can I ask you about this? Because you held a meeting with Syrian officials post-Assad. If we can talk about this quickly. We're going to go back to Iran, of course.
Okay. Look, we'd like very much to have peace with Syria. I think the issues are pretty simple, but there's two criteria that have to be met. First of all, our Druze neighbors that live along the border of the Golan in this area called Sueda, it's about 700,000, they need to be protected. And last July, there was a mass slaughter of Druze. And we have to be...
Which is a small minority that's in Syria.
It's a small minority, but it's in Syria, Lebanon, Israel.
Yes.
And they're loyal minorities wherever they are. And they're certainly loyal in Israel.
Yeah.
And we need to protect them. Mm-hmm. But they also happen to be close to our border. And we cannot have jihadis on our border anymore. That's the lesson of October 7th. That's what we had on October 7th. We thought that we could have arrangements with jihadis. We can't have them on the border, because if they flip, if we let our guard down and the perfect storm happens like it did on October 7th, we're going to be destroyed. So we have to come up with arrangements where A, the Jews are protected, and B, there's a very clear pathway to defense of our northeastern border on the Golan Heights, which means that there's going to be a limited amount of divisions of the Syrian army which can come south. And we're beginning to talk about it. We're beginning to negotiate it. And I think it could go very well. I think if the intentions on our part are certainly wholesome and good, positive, we just need the assurances, the confidence building measures that the jihadis that have been incorporated into the Syrian army are not going to backtrack. And there's not a long history of jihadis becoming Jeffersonians. So we're not looking for a declaration of independence in Damascus, but we are looking for signs that we're not going to go into a confrontational status once again. And I think that takes a little bit of time. We would have preferred to take things gradually with Ashara.
Mm-hmm. To lead where? Like Abraham Accords like?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason why we can't enter into the Abraham Accords with Syria. I mean, I'd love to be sitting in Damascus eating hummus. Why not? And having Syrians come into Israel and
maybe have a competition between the hummus in Jerusalem.
Yeah, we could have competition, of course. But no, I mean, imagine that we opened up all the sites in Syria and Israel to each other for tourism. Mm-hmm. Just imagine what it would be like. And so many of the Jewish community who were driven out of Syria, who could come back and, visit as they're visiting Israel,
My mom was born and raised in the Jewish quarter in Aleppo, even though she comes from a Muslim family, and she knows what happens to her friends and neighbors. So those are stories that you don't hear in the media. But
There's such a deep Jewish history in Aleppo.
Absolutely. In Damascus, yeah. Very ancient. So let's go back to Iran, because we know that the U.S.
Let's go back to Iran.
I know.
Let's go back. We had a great relationship with Iran in the 70s.
That's true. And people...
Direct flights between Tel Aviv and Tehran.
Absolutely. And the Iranian people, I have never seen more thankful to the United States, to Israel. They want peace. They're so aware, and they're so beyond actually ecstatic that the United States and Israel are actually confronting this regime, that they're taking out all of these capabilities that they were terrorized from for so long. And I have so many Iranian friends, and I'm telling you this based on just what I hear, words of mouth from people who are in Iran, outside of Iran. This is just the reality that a lot of people don't know about. But when we are right now seeing negotiations between the U.S. administration, President Trump's administration, and the regime in Iran, or whatever is left of that regime, what is Israel's position on having or achieving any type of deal with the remnants of the regime? Is that something that Israel would ever trust in, or want to achieve such a thing, or what is the position?
Well, look, the United States is our senior partner. There's no question President Trump is the leader of the free world, and he will lead on this issue. And the same way that we went into this together, we planned it together, we're carrying it out together, we're going to end it together. We'd very much like to see a situation where the remnants of this regime, if there are so weak that there's no future that sees them reconstitute these three programs: nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, and support for proxies. That's where I think we have to be, and not just focus on getting the straits open. The straits are very, very important.
Yes.
And just imagine, just how right we were about this whole issue, because imagine if they achieved a nuclear weapon and then they held the world hostage on the Straits of Hormuz. A barrel of oil wouldn't go up to $150, it would be at $300. They could do anything they want, because otherwise they're a nuclear power and they can threaten with nuclear weapons. Threaten their neighbors with ballistic missiles, hold the world hostage. Look at what these people do. I mean, they basically proved everything that we've been saying for so many years. If they have the ability to inflict harm, death, destruction, murder, and mayhem on their neighbors, they will do it. And they're doing it right now.
If we are talking about this regime basically be weakened to a point where they're not able to threaten the world anymore, but for a lot of people in Iran, of course, they want to see this regime fall. What is your message
We'd
to
love
the people
to
of
see,
Iran?
look, we'd love to see this regime fall in its entirety. I mean, look, if we were writing a script on the future, right? We were sitting down, you and me, Hayvi, would say, what's the best scenario? So we'd say, look, the opposition groups in Iran, of which there are many, they haven't been able to coalesce over the years. There's a complete lack of unity among these groups, which range from the monarchists to the communists and everything in between. What if they all sat together and representatives of the minorities in the periphery of the country,
Yes.
they all came together and created a transitional government that would run the country for a year or two, bring it back together, and then go into a democratic process of free and open elections. Imagine that happened. That's probably the script we'd like to write. But we can't do that. You can't impose democracy from the outside. We're degrading this regime the best we can. And hopefully when these operations of Roaring Lion and Epic Fury are over, they're going to be degraded to the point where the people of Iran can rise up and take their country back. A number of things have to happen. Like, for example, we need to see more cracks in the Basij and the internal security forces and the RGC. We're seeing the beginnings of cracks. There have been some units that refuse to report for work, for example, like an Italian strike. We have to see more of that. And we're giving it a little bit more time. Nobody anticipated that January would happen. Nobody saw it coming, right? Nobody knew when the Soviet Union would collapse, exactly when. And, remember all the experts who were saying the Soviet Union is stronger than Western democracy. There's nothing that'll bring it down. And it did collapse. The Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union was over. Nobody imagined that the Romanian people would turn their guns on Ceausescu. He called them out into the square and they were all chanting. And all of a sudden they changed the chant, turned their guns around and drove Ceausescu out of town. So we have to hope, we have to believe that if we do the right thing, tyranny will crack. Tyranny will come down. Tyranny will be broken. This is a country with a brilliant civilization that goes back so many years, the Persian civilization.
Yes.
And it's not 12er Shiite Islam, okay? It's far, far different, and it needs to be expressed. And the people want to express that civilization. The Iranian people are probably the most pro-Western people in the Middle East after Israel.
Yep.
Right? So they just need a voice. And we can help set the stage, but we can't,
Yes.
we
They
can't
have
run the
to make
government.
it
We can't
happen.
run the government for it.
Exactly. What are your thoughts on the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi?
Well, look, he certainly appears to be a very significant leader. I mean, when he called for people to come out to the streets in January, they did. He told them where, he told them what time, and he probably has a very large segment of the population. It's hard to estimate. Is it 20%, 30%, 40%, or more? But it's very significant, obviously. But again, what we need is a broad coalition. Because you have many others, minorities and otherwise.
also.
The Kurds, for
What are your
example.
what
The
are your
Kurds,
thoughts?
the Baluchis, the Azeris. There's so many,
Yes.
potent forces there. And if they all come together, it seems to me, just judging from history, that if they come together, they're going to be able to confront this this tyranny.
Yes, they need to work together. This is the message. Unity right now. That's what's needed. A lot of people don't realize that the Islamic Republic regime also started firing missiles against different Gulf countries. Of course, we know what happened towards Israel. There's non-stop missiles. I have a lot of friends who are always in bunkers. And it's very unfortunate, but people in Israel are used to it. It's something that people know because they've lived through the Hamas, the Hezbollah, all of the different Arab, there's a history there of being attacked, right? But for Gulf countries, that's new. And I know some of friends of mine who have been having anxiety attacks and fears. We've seen it that's happening to different countries. What we're hearing from different people is that all of them that are on the ground in these countries are like, please get this regime done with. We even saw some news about the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, asking President Trump to finish the job, basically. What is your thoughts?
Well, the Gulf countries, perhaps with the exception of Qatar, have been very strong on this, and they want to see this regime fall. MBZ, MBS, the Bahrainis are very committed to seeing this. Look, it's a matter of short-term pain for long-term gain. And that's what I think Israel has demonstrated, this resilience. And people say, I talk to my grandkids all the time. I say, Saba, Grandpa, we'll stay in the bomb shelter as long as necessary. Just get the job done, as if, I'm flying the planes and getting it done. But they say, just get it done. It doesn't matter. As long as this time, you get it done. And imagine if we get this done, there's going to be no more support for Hezbollah, no more support for Hamas, no more support for Islamic Jihad, no more support for Islamic terroristic fundamentalist domination of anything that's not part of this orbit.
Yeah.
This is a brand of Islam which is offensive. It's offensive to not only to Jews and Christians, it's offensive to Muslims.
Yes.
And that tension within the Muslim world between the extremists, whether they're Shia or Sunni, the Muslim Brotherhood is a
it's just the other face to the
just
same
the other
coin.
face of
Yes.
It's the other side of this, and they're obviously opposed to each other, but they're united
Absolutely.
against Judeo-Christian civilization.
That's
right?
true, and you
First,
see it right now.
Sure. First, let's defeat the West. The Saturday people and the Sunday people, they call them. First we defeat the West, and then we'll fight it out amongst ourselves, is what they say. But in the meantime, you've got the extremist Sunni groups, the extremist Shia groups. Everything's led by Iran. Everybody's led by this regime.
Yes.
So if this regime falls, the people of Iran are going to achieve their freedom. The countries in the region will achieve their freedom. Extremism, the exportation of terrorism, will be dealt a death blow.
Yeah, and it's really astonishing to me the disconnect between the public opinion in the Middle East about this and the hope that people feel because of what's happening. And you see the opinions in the West that is so disconnected, that is saying, oh, this is war, this is negative. And it's like people in the Middle East are saying, please, we've been held hostage by this access for far too long. Like you said, Hezbollah has been one of the most powerful proxies of the Islamic Republic regime and has been committing atrocities across the region. And actually, it attacked Israel on behalf of the IRGC while having Iranian generals or commanders inside of Lebanon at that time. So it kind of demonstrated to the people of Lebanon in a very clear way how much this is a kind of an Iranian tool, right? And an Iranian militia, terrorist group. And then we're seeing the change in the rhetoric inside of Lebanon and how even the government is speaking differently. But it's a complex story there. You actually served as a medic in Lebanon at one point. Let's talk about your
position. Spent a few months in the Shuf Mountains. It's such a beautiful area.
Oh, so yeah, tell us about that. And what is your views on this? Like, what also is the objective by Israel right now about Hezbollah?
The objective is just to push back Hezbollah from firing anti-tank missiles into our communities. Mm-hmm. It's a very simple equation. We don't want Radwan forces, they're the commandos of Hezbollah, who try to penetrate our northern border, take hostages, kill people. We don't want them coming through tunnels, above land, below ground, to kill people. That's number one. Number two, we don't want missiles being fired on communities. The line we took in Lebanon now, in South Lebanon, just south of the Litani River, it's an anti-tank line. In other words, that's where missiles, anti-tank missiles, which are direct. In other words, they're not kind of looped. All right, they don't go up and down. They come fired straight. They're very, very powerful. That's the line that we've taken, so that anti-tank missiles can't be fired into residential neighborhoods. I mean, why wouldn't the world be lining up behind us and saying, that's a really good idea, not to allow terrorists to fire anti-tank missiles into residential buildings. But instead of that, we've got the French running around saying, leave southern Lebanon. Israel's occupying southern Lebanon. Hold your horses. We don't want to occupy anybody else's territory. But somebody else's territory has got to prevent terrorists from firing missiles into our residential neighborhoods.
Do you want the dismantlement or the disarmament of Hezbollah as a result?
Let's not get into etymology, into what the word is. We need a situation where nobody's firing missiles. Now, if you want to call that disarming, disengaging, disconnecting, decommissioning, disallowing, call whatever you want. But disallowing is not going to be enough. Disallowing meaning that they maintain these weapons and they can use it at will. No, because that can change. Yes, they have to be disarmed. They cannot be in a position where at their own whim they use weapons to inflict harm on our northern communities or on anybody. Look, Lebanon has been taken over. It's occupied by Hezbollah. And most of the money comes from Iran.
Yes.
It comes through Turkey, about $1 billion a year, and goes to fund their illicit activity in Lebanon, which is basically funded within Lebanon on the trade in Captagon and drugs that are smuggled to the rest of the world. These are bad people. These are bad actors. I mean, the connection here between terrorism and the drug trade.
It's like narco-terrorism.
Narco-terrorism. Thank you. That's a very good term. That's what we're seeing in Lebanon more than any other place in the world. Maybe with the exception of Mexico. It's narco-terrorism. But even in Mexico, you don't have a situation. That's a very good example. Imagine for a moment that in northern Mexico, they're firing missiles into Laredo, Texas. What would the United States do? I mean, it would erase everything on the other side of the border. So here we've got narco-terrorists.
Basically, if it's as if those cartels in Mexico have infiltrated also the military, so the military is unable to confront them, and that would have been a disaster for Mexico, which is exactly what's happening in Lebanon. The military in Lebanon has been infiltrated by Hezbollah, so they're unable and unwilling to confront Hezbollah, even though that's the demand of the people in Lebanon.
You're absolutely right. Sometimes we pass intel to the Lebanese government to pass it on to the Lebanese armed forces to remove a terror cell of Hezbollah from a certain place, and it leaks. So we have a problem. Now, I know that President Al really wants to sit down and make peace with us. And the majority of the Lebanese people do. Many of the Shiites as well. But, they're terrorized, and they're deathly afraid of a civil war. They're deathly afraid of Hezbollah. So how do you get around that? If the Lebanese don't take Hezbollah on, somebody has to. But in the meantime, we don't want to be the policeman of Lebanon. We're not there to police Lebanon. We're there to protect our people living across the border.
Are you engaging diplomatically now with Lebanon, with the government? What about the French mediation? What are your thoughts on that?
The French should mediate their own streets of Paris where Jews aren't safe to walk around. Okay, we don't need the French mediating in Lebanon.
There's direct talks now. It happened for the first time a couple of times already, right?
We have talks in Nakura. There are a number of tracks. We're talking, but the problem is, at the end of the day, what's the mechanism which is going to disarm Hezbollah? We've signed ceasefires and more ceasefires, and in every one of these ceasefire agreements, there's 1701 and 995, and everybody knows the numbers. But at the end of the day, it's just a matter of time before Hezbollah starts shooting missiles again. Now, we're a self-respecting country, and we're not going to live like that. And if we have to go into South Lebanon and knock Hezbollah back across the Litani and prevent them from firing these missiles, we're going to do it.
And do you see peace between Israel and Lebanon when and if this happens?
Unquestionably. There's no reason in the world why there wouldn't be peace between our two countries. We don't have an Iran that's going to intimidate them anymore. Once Hezbollah is gone, we don't have a Hezbollah to intimidate them anymore. It's going to be a huge victory for peace. And I could see Lebanon, I could see Syria easily moving into the Abraham Accord mode. I could see a warmer peace with Lebanon and even Syria than we have with Egypt. We have peace with Egypt since for a long time, right? And it's, they haven't de-radicalized. Look at what the UAE did. It's just an amazing thing what MBZ has accomplished. And he did it relatively quickly. When 2011 is when you left Syria?
Yes.
So 2011 is the Arab Spring, right?
Yes. That was the beginning. I kind of left a few months into it.
So what happened, I studied this because I was fascinated by it. And I spent a lot of time in Abu Dhabi. And by the way, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I feel more comfortable walking through the streets of Abu Dhabi and Dubai than I do in any European city. I mean, you can't walk through Paris today or London with a kippah on your head. It's dangerous. But Abu Dhabi, Dubai, you're perfectly safe. That's an amazing accomplishment. That's a civilizational change. And they did it in a short time. And the experts there told me that they discovered that de-radicalization, once you set your mind to it, can happen relatively quickly. Imagine that there was a real process of de-radicalization in Gaza. Mm-hmm. Imagine there was a real process of de-radicalization in Syria, where instead of having these textbooks that still depict Jews as monkeys and pigs, they would actually depict us as human beings who want peace as much as they do. You can have a whole different Middle East. And that's really what this battle is about. It's the Islam that's being exported from Tehran versus the Islam that's being exported from Abu Dhabi.
Can we talk about Gaza? I know it's not on the news as much anymore. We know that Hamas continues to control around 47% of Gaza. There's this bureaucratic government that is in Egypt that wants to operate within areas that are controlled by Hamas. There's a lot of questions about that, but there's 53% of Gaza that is now basically Hamas free. Nothing happening in that area. Can you share with me what's Israel's strategy and objective in Gaza today? Is Israel willing to go after Hamas and disarm them? What do you say about this?
Well, we're willing. We certainly prefer that we don't be labored with the task, but we might have to. We don't want to, but we might have to. 53% is not occupied by Hamas, but almost all the population is occupied by Hamas. In other words, the same brutal tyranny is still governing Gaza. Yeah. The only difference is that they've been pushed back. They don't have the 53% of the territory. They have a huge difficulty in smuggling arms, right? So they've been dramatically degraded. And but at the end of the day, there's a 20-point plan. The Trump plan that was successful in getting all of our hostages out also requires of Hamas to disarm and for Gaza to be demilitarized. Now, if that can happen by this international agency that's come together, or agencies that's come together, mm-hmm. God bless, or inshallah, as we say. Mm-hmm. We have to hope that that's the case, but we're not going to accept a situation where Hamas is going to remain armed and reconstitute itself, because that's going to be a direct threat on our population. As I said before, our lesson after October 7th is we do not have jihadis on our border. So either jihadis have to leave or they have to become something other than jihadis. Mm-hmm. We're just not going to have them on the border. Oh, they can't be armed. and they can't pose a threat to our civilians anymore. We had the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. And we're not going through this again. So everything has to change. The dynamics have to be altered in order for us to move constructively into the future.
Do you see that after this confrontation with the Islamic Republic regime in Iran, that we will have a more peaceful region where there's more Abraham Accords with other Muslim countries, Arab countries? Is that the future that would follow this conflict, or is it the hope of so many?
It's certainly my hope and prayer, and the hope and prayer of everybody in Israel, everybody, right, left, and center. A lot depends on how Iran is going to be left when this is over. If it's going to be perceived as a regime that's going to be able to reconstitute and go back in a certain amount of time, whether it's 2 or 5 or 10 years, into a mode of Islamism and the exporting of this political Islam, then I think countries are still going to be reticent and anxious about entering into an entente with Israel and the West. But if it's clear that that kind of Islamism has been defeated, that there's not going to be the exporting of terror and of holding people hostage and of nuclear weapons and so on, I think that that's exactly where we're moving. We're moving into a coalescence, a unified region where the United States will have to be less present. It will be able to move its assets, particularly military assets, to the Far East to deal with the rising powers of China and so on, the preventing of the hegemony of China in that region. If there's more regional cohesion in the Middle East, there's less of a need for the United States to be present. Israel and its neighbors can deal with a regional quiet and defense and security. So I think that's where we should. You know, Aristotle, the great philosopher, said you need a telos. Telos means something that you're moving towards. You know, what's your end game? He said, what comes first, the acorn or the tree? Everybody, of course, says the acorn, right? The acorn comes before the tree. But Aristotle said, no, the tree comes first. Because if the tree wasn't there first, the acorn wouldn't go into the tree.
Yes.
Why does the acorn grow into a tree? Because the tree is inherent in the acorn, right?
Yes.
So you have to have a telos. You have to have a vision. You have to see, where are we going?
Yes.
And I think we're going to greater regional cohesion and accommodation and moderation. And if that happens, it's going to be a very redemptive age that we're moving into.
Amen. I want to thank you so much, Ambassador Leiter, for this very insightful conversation. Would love to have you again in the future.
I'd love to come again. Thank you so much for having me, Heavy.
Thank you.